This video is for informational, educational, and documentary purposes only. It contains dramatized accounts based on public allegations and courtroom testimonies. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence as the video began to play. Grainy footage that spoke volumes without uttering a word. Within moments, Mr. Combs' twin daughters, Jessie and Delilah, abruptly rose from their seats, visibly shaken, and exited the room without a word. Though the cameras did not follow, reporters later murmured, they looked pale, ashamed. The footage wasn't just graphic, it was devastating. It bore a title, Freak Off, a term that Cassie Ventura testified was used to describe the darkest chapter of her relationship with Mr. Sean Combs. What began as rumors has now erupted into federal testimony, concrete evidence, and stunned expressions across the gallery. This is no longer just a celebrity scandal. It's a reckoning in a court of law. From threatening text messages to disturbing surveillance recordings, the trial is unraveling years of silence. And now, even Mr. Combs' own family cannot bear to watch. What follows may forever alter how the public perceives him. When the lights dimmed and the prosecution asked the courtroom to focus, everyone understood something significant was coming, but no one was ready for what followed. The judge granted a motion allowing the jury to view a piece of evidence long whispered about, but never publicly confirmed. A video labeled Freak Off 2013, recorded in a Miami penthouse. Despite strong objections from the defense, the judge ruled in favor of transparency. A partial blackout of the courtroom was ordered. Cameras were shut off. Only the jury, attorneys, Mr. Combs, and a few selected observers, including his family, were permitted to remain. As the video played, Cassie Ventura, the prosecution's key witness, sat calmly near the jury box, showing no visible reaction. Mr. Combs, however, appeared visibly altered. Gone was the confidence he had displayed in previous days. He slouched slightly, hands clenched, eyes locked on the screen. About halfway through the footage, his daughters, Jessie and Delilah, stood up. According to eyewitnesses, one whispered, "No, I can't," before walking out. Their expressions were blank, frozen, yet fractured. Outside the courthouse, reporters captured them leaving, escorted by aides and security, declining to comment. While the full contents of the video were not detailed in official court records, summaries provided a chilling account. Cassie appeared alongside an unidentified individual in what prosecutors described as a staged and directed scenario. Mr. Combs' voice was allegedly heard behind the camera, giving instructions. Though large parts of the footage were blurred or redacted, its emotional impact was unmistakable. Multiple jurors showed visible signs of distress. One reportedly wiped away tears. Another sat stiffly, jaw clenched. This wasn't tabloid fodder, it was evidence. Evidence of control. Evidence of psychological manipulation. Most of all, evidence that supported Cassie's testimony. The video's timing, her age, the orchestrated setting, all matched her earlier accounts. As the screen faded to black, silence once again filled the courtroom. No gasps, no whispers, only the voice of the judge breaking the stillness, announcing a 15-minute recess. The moment Cassie Ventura took the stand, it was clear that this would not be easy, neither for her nor for anyone in the courtroom. She walked in calmly, 8 months pregnant, removed her coat, and turned slightly to face the jury. Throughout her testimony, she often placed a hand on her belly, subtle, but deeply symbolic. She wasn't just reliving trauma. She was protecting a new life while recounting the pain of a previous one. She told the court about the first time Mr. Combs introduced the term freak off. She was 21 at the time and unsure of what it meant. He described it as a form of voyeurism, claiming it would strengthen their relationship. What began with romantic intentions quickly evolved into complete control. He dictated what she wore, what she said, even which drugs to take. She read aloud text exchanges pulled from his Louis Vuitton medical bag. In one message, she asked, "Which color pill?" His reply, "The green one." Cassie testified that freak-offs were never spontaneous. They were choreographed, planned in advance with lights, outfits, camera setups, and, most disturbingly, participants. Many of them, she said, were escorts she hired herself, out of fear of the consequences if she refused to comply. I did it because I thought I loved him, she explained. Because I didn't want to make him angry. Because I didn't know how to say no anymore. When asked about her emotional state during those years, she admitted to feeling completely dehumanized. There were times I looked in the mirror and couldn't recognize the person staring back. When the prosecution asked her directly if she ever wanted to participate in these freak-offs, she paused before answering. At times, yes, because it meant I could spend time with him. But I never wanted the rest of it. Not the pressure, not the fear. Meanwhile, Mr. Combs appeared to be unraveling. Observers noted that he began scribbling nervously on a yellow legal pad, shaking his leg beneath the table. At one point, he leaned over to whisper something to his attorney while gesturing toward Cassie. His face was pale. The man once known for his larger-than-life charisma now looked as though he had just received a sentence of his own. The defense tried to paint the relationship as consensual. They argued that Cassie enjoyed it, willingly arranged encounters, and never once said no. But the prosecution countered sharply. What happens to a woman who knows what no might cost her? While the jury absorbed Cassie's chilling testimony, Mr. Combs' family sat stone-faced until they couldn't anymore. His mother, Janice Combs, clutched a rosary with her eyes closed. His sons, King and Justin, avoided all eye contact with their father, choosing instead to stare straight ahead, arms folded, occasionally watching the jury's reactions. But it was his twin daughters, Jessie and Delilah, just 17 years old, who seemed the most visibly shaken. Until this moment, they had remained composed. But the combination of the video and the testimony had clearly shattered something. After they walked out, speculation swirled. Were more secrets about to surface? The prosecution hinted at it by bringing up Mr. Combs' former partner, Kim Porter. Cassie testified that he insisted they keep their relationship private, not just because of the children, but because Kim would be hurt. However, Cassie claimed that his relationship with Kim overlapped with hers. We weren't public for a long time, but he was still with Kim. We both knew. He made sure we both knew. And then her story turned even darker. Cassie recounted a moment when Kim confronted Mr. Combs about his behavior. A week later, she was hospitalized. He told me not to say anything. He said she was fine. Years later, Kim Porter's sudden death, officially ruled as pneumonia, raised fresh questions. Many, including her former partner and the father of Quincy, I'll be sure, have expressed doubts and called for a second investigation. In court, prosecutors presented messages in which Cassie said she feared she would end up like Kim. When asked why, she replied, "Because I knew too much, and he knew I knew." As her testimony continued, the courtroom fell silent again. Cassie began to unveil the structure behind the so-called freak-offs. It wasn't just Mr. Combs. According to her, a full support system enabled it. She named names: David James, Christina Courtroom, various assistants, travel agents, and private security. They weren't just aware, she said. They were helping make it happen. One of the most alarming revelations came when she described how Mr. Combs tracked her. He didn't live far, but if I didn't answer my phone, he would send someone. Sometimes security, sometimes Christina. If I didn't text back within an hour, someone was at my door. This statement confirmed what prosecutors had alluded to from the beginning. This wasn't just emotional manipulation. It was surveillance-level control. Cassie testified that Mr. Combs had access to her phone, location, and even private messages. On one occasion, when she arranged for a friend to visit, the friend never showed up. He told me he warned her off. I didn't ask how. When the prosecutor asked if she feared for her own safety, Cassie didn't hesitate. Every day, she said, but I feared for hers, too. The alleged system Mr. Combs created was described as deliberate and coordinated. It involved travel documents, fake bookings, and escort rosters masked as stylists or dancers, anything to get people on planes. Cassie testified that these trips went to Miami, Los Angeles, New York, and Ibiza. Each location followed the same script: drugs, costumes, lighting setups, and the scene. Some sessions, she said, lasted 36 to 72 hours, One went on for 4 full days. No sleep, just pills, instructions, and waiting for his signal to end it. The signal rarely came early. Prosecutors emphasized that this system mirrored the textbook definition of racketeering. This was not simply about one man's disturbing preferences. It was about a coordinated network of manipulation, coercion, and exploitation. And with every name Cassie revealed, the list of potential witnesses continued to grow. The testimony shifted from logistics to psychology. It was here that jurors began to grasp the deeper, more insidious grip Mr. Combs had over Cassie Ventura. This wasn't merely abuse, it was emotional warfare. Cassie made a quiet but jarring admission. I loved him. Her voice was soft, but the words landed heavily in the room. She continued, I love in the way you love someone who saves you, even if they're also the one hurting you. In the early stages of their relationship, Mr. Combs could be charming, generous, and kind. When he wanted to be, he made her feel like she was the only person in the world. But that affection came with conditions. Maintaining his approval meant compliance, participation, and silence, all paid for with emotional currency. It was like a drug, she confessed. Love was the reward. Fear was the punishment. The prosecution presented text messages Cassie had sent to Mr. Combs during those years. Messages full of warmth and even eagerness. The defense would later cite these as proof of mutual affection. But Cassie explained, I said what I needed to say to feel safe. Sometimes it wasn't even about the act, she added. It was about surviving the moment. She described one incident in particular. She had tried to gently express her discomfort with participating in a freak-off through an email. Mr. Combs responded simply, I know you don't want to do it. Rather than assert her boundary, she backed down. I was scared he'd cut me off, she told the court. I said it wasn't true, that I lied, because the truth would have made him angry. The jury listened intently. Several jurors were seen nodding slowly, as if recognizing the complexity she described. Loving someone who simultaneously causes harm, feeling trapped between closeness and safety. Her voice cracked only once during this portion of her testimony. When the prosecutor asked, Did you ever enjoy it? Cassie replied, Only because it meant time with him. I didn't enjoy what we did, but I loved him, and that made everything confusing. By now, the courtroom understood this was more than a singular trauma. It hinted at a pattern, a darker legacy. The prosecution drew a connection to Mr. Combs' former partner and the mother of his children, Kim Porter. When asked directly if she ever feared for her life, Cassie replied, yes, especially after what happened with Kim. She explained that Mr. Combs refused to talk about Porter's final days, simply saying she was sick. But I don't believe that anymore, Cassie added. The court was reminded that Kim Porter was found dead in 2018, officially from pneumonia. Yet many, including her ex-partner Albie, Shure and Quincy's biological father, have publicly questioned that ruling and called for a new investigation. She was fine one day, Cassie recalled, and gone the next. Adding to the suspicion, she testified that Mr. Combs warned her to stay quiet. He told me not to talk to anyone, said people were watching, said I needed to stay out of it. Prosecutors introduced a text message exchange between Cassie and a friend in which she wrote, If I ever disappear like Kim, it wasn't random. Then came perhaps the most chilling moment of the day. When asked if she believed her story could have ended like Kim Porter's, Cassie hesitated. Yes, she finally said. That's why I left. That's why I'm here. The room fell into a heavy silence. Her fear wasn't just personal, it was historical. Her testimony tied back to another woman, another silence, another questionable ending. The judge called a break. Some jurors remained in their seats, heads down, visibly disturbed. Mr. Combs sat motionless, silent, pale, cornered not just by legal charges, but by the weight of his past. Day 3 of Cassie's testimony had already been intense. But the courtroom reached its emotional boiling point when the judge made a decision that shook everyone. After fierce objections from the defense, the court allowed the jury to view a short portion of a recorded freak-off video. The footage, allegedly filmed by Mr. Combs himself, had been stored on a private hard drive and later recovered by Cassie before she left him for good. Cameras weren't permitted in the courtroom. but attendees described the atmosphere as chilling once the lights dimmed and the screen lit up. Even the court sketch artist reportedly paused mid-drawing. As the footage played, reactions were swift and visceral. Some gallery members turned away. A juror covered her mouth in shock. But the most striking reaction came from Mr. Combs' daughters, Jessie and Delilah, who had been seated quietly beside their grandmother, Janice Combs. Suddenly, they stood up and left the courtroom. Observers described their expressions as stunned, eyes wide, lips trembling. They did not return. The video wasn't explicit in the way many anticipated, but what it revealed was power, submission, and silence. In the footage, Cassie's posture appeared tense. Her eyes flicked between the camera and the person directing her behind it. She looked visibly uncomfortable, her movements stiff, mechanical. It was as if she were following commands she had no will to obey. After the footage ended, the prosecution asked Cassie Ventura to explain what the jury had just witnessed. "That was the first time I cried in front of him after Freak Off," she said, "because I couldn't take it anymore, and he still picked up the camera." Her voice trembled, but never broke. The defense repeatedly objected, arguing the footage lacked context and was consensual, but the damage had already been done. The combination of the visual evidence, Cassie's emotional explanation, and her previous testimony painted a powerful picture, not just of abuse, but of something systematic. Rehearsed, directed. One juror whispered to another, "That's all I needed." And in that moment, the shift was undeniable. This trial was no longer about Cassie's words alone. Now it had a face, a video, and a room full of people who could no longer pretend they hadn't seen what they had. Cassie's final day on the stand ended with a warning. There are more of us. It didn't take long for that warning to prove true. By the next court session, the prosecution had already received confirmation that additional individuals, former employees, drivers, assistants, even a former hairstylist, were now willing to testify. The prosecution acted quickly. First came Israel Flores, a former hotel security officer. He testified about an incident at the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles, confirming part of Cassie's earlier account. "I saw her with a bruised eye," he said. "I was told to ignore it, but I logged it anyway." His account added a third-party layer of credibility to the 2016 surveillance footage the court had already reviewed. Then came a former assistant, whose identity was kept confidential. She claimed she was instructed to transport locked briefcases across state lines. "I didn't know what was in them," she said, "but the instructions were clear. Don't open. Don't ask questions." Pressed by the prosecution, she admitted she believed the cases contained cash or drugs. "Why else lock them and send me with a burner phone?" she asked rhetorically. But perhaps the most explosive testimony came from a male escort named Daniel Phillip. He said he was hired multiple times in 2012 and 2013. What began as private, consensual contracts soon turned coercive. "I didn't want to go back," he said, "but I was told if I didn't, they'd ruin my license. My career." Phillip identified Mr. Combs as the orchestrator. "He told me where to go, what to do, and he watched." Each new witness bolstered Cassie's claims, but more than that, they revealed a system, a method. There were invitations, NDAs, cash payments, and through it all, Mr. Combs remained in control. The prosecution was no longer just laying out events. They were building a case that pointed to a pattern, an organization, and potentially a criminal conspiracy. With every new name, every new layer of testimony, the image of Mr. Combs' empire began to crumble. What once looked like a successful entertainment label now resembled a machine built to enforce silence and submission. By now, the once iconic image of Mr. Sean Combs, confident, untouchable, commanding, had disappeared. He now sat hunched at the defense table, his eyes darting nervously between attorneys and jurors. He was visibly sweating. The persona he had cultivated over decades, built on fame, wealth, and control, was dissolving moment by moment in front of the public. Then came an unexpected moment during a recess. Mr. Combs asked to speak directly to the judge. His attorneys leaned in, clearly trying to dissuade him, but he stood anyway. "Excuse me, Your Honor," he said. "I'm a little nervous." The courtroom froze. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Combs, you'll have your time through counsel," he replied firmly. That one sentence from Mr. Combs said more than he likely intended. He was unraveling. Back in session, the prosecution announced a new witness they hoped to call, someone referenced earlier in the trial and in past public interviews, but whose testimony had never been guaranteed. Gene Deal, Mr. Combs' former bodyguard. The moment his name was mentioned, audible gasps filled the gallery. Gene Deal had long been a vocal critic of Mr. Combs. On podcasts and interviews, he had told stories about freak-offs, about Kim Porter, about NDAs, burner phones, and a network of security guards paid to silent staff. Until now, he had remained a peripheral figure, a controversial voice online. But now, he was on the verge of taking the stand. The defense objected immediately, citing hearsay and concerns over credibility. The judge called for a sidebar. When the court resumed, it was clear Gene Deal would testify. "We'll take him on Monday," the judge announced. Mr. Combs lowered his head. As the day came to a close, the final image wasn't Cassie. It wasn't the video. It was Mr. Combs, silent, isolated, watching as his daughters walked past him without a word. They didn't look at him. They didn't slow down. They simply left. The man who once dictated the sound of a generation, who shaped culture, who threw parties that made headlines, no longer held the room. The freak-off footage had shattered the public narrative. But what followed, the cascade of testimonies, the pattern of control, and now his own unraveling, was shifting something much bigger. This wasn't just a trial anymore. It was a reckoning.